Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and we are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through this life and with your relationship with Christ. Last week, we had an amazing conversation with Leah McDermott about unschooling, and today we are here to hear the rest of her interview and her story. So let's jump right in. Now, talk to us a little bit about what does quote curriculum look like? What does learning how to do math or learning how to, write, um, I almost said novels, how to write papers, essays,
Yeah. Yeah.
how does that play into unschooling?
hmm I do want to touch real quick, though, one thing you said that I think is really important for parents, because I think this will make a big difference with like that mindset in deschooling. You mentioned that you now run a podcast, and what you would choose to do in your free time was basically pretend you had a radio show. And if you take a look at most entrepreneurs, the work that they are doing didn't come from anything they learned they were good at in school. They do the work that they chose to do for fun
For fun.
in their free
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
And that is how
It's
you
true.
discover who you are, when no one is forcing you, when there's no pressure. And with that unschooling, and this kind of segues into what curriculum looks like as an unschooler, because that's a big myth too, is that curriculum, you can't be an unschooler and use a curriculum, which is not true at all. The goal of unschooling is to teach your kids how to learn, not tell them what to learn. That's like the big mission. Because if you know how to learn, you can figure out anything, anytime. If you know how to ask a question, if you know how to ask for help, if you know how to word your searches, right? The entire world's information is in this rectangle now. So I don't need a person lecturing me to teach me something. I can find it out myself because I have those tools. And so my job now as a parent is to teach my kid those tools, teach them media literacy, how to know if something is true, how to fact check. But that's the goal. And so how does curriculum play into that? Look, I authored a curriculum, I sell a curriculum. And that is because a lot of parents aren't ready to jump straight from public school to unschooling. There's so much work mentally that needs to be done before being there. So, if you're listening to this podcast episode, and you're like, that sounds really great, but I literally don't even know how to be with my kids during the day. And that's a big one. We don't know how to be together anymore. As soon as a baby's born, we separate them. Like that's also, for a reason, the society that we're in, to separate. And simply choosing homeschool over public school for so many people is just relearning how to be a family again, how to be together all day, every day. I just ran a poll recently in my community about what's your greatest fear of unschooling. And I thought so much of it would be like, I don't know how to teach them. A huge chunk of it was, how will I ever have alone time? How will I be with my kids all day? Like that part of human nature, like we don't as a society know how to do that anymore. And so for people who are still working out so much of that, a little bit of structure can be really, really helpful as a bridge between here and there. It doesn't have to be black and white. And so, the curriculum that I wrote, for example, is extreme. There are no textbooks, there are no workbooks, there are no tests. It's completely child-led. So it's starts with the development of the child instead of the standardized test lists, right? So we don't say you need to know fractions and decimals and percentages at this age. So that's where we're starting. Instead, we say, okay, you are 8 years old. And so you are really starting to figure out like how other people communicate, and you're starting to feel feelings, and you're having hormone surges, like prepubescent hormone surges. So you're feeling all of these emotions in ways you've never felt them before. Let's start with that. And then we can build off of that we can talk about math in real context. Where do you use math in your real life? I use it when I'm cooking, when I'm shopping, when I'm calculating how long it's going to take me to travel somewhere, when I'm buying gas. And I'm going to invite my kids into that so that they can see those skills in real life. So, curriculum can mean all kinds of things. It's not just a boxed set. It can be, bits and pieces. It can be real life things. online classes. There's no, curriculum doesn't have to look like one big thing you purchase and it comes in a box. It's life. Life is a curriculum, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even making lunch,
Yeah.
right? It's something kids don't do at school. They go to a cafeteria and they either they bring lunch or they go to the cafeteria and pick lunch
Mm-hmm.
up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I always experience as a homeschooler myself is I made lunch every day. I
Mm-hmm.
learned how to cook. And that's not a skill that a lot of my peers had
Yeah.
coming out,
Especially
going into
male peers.
college,
Yeah.
especially male peers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going into college, they were on their own for the first time and didn't know how to cook or do laundry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those are life skills that a child could learn early. I mean, my 2-year-old mops the floor because
Yeah.
I got him a child side mop because he's
Mm-hmm.
interested in that. He
Yeah.
loves to mimic and he loves to copy everything I'm doing. So he has his little pretend vacuum and his little
Mm-hmm.
tiny mop that actually does work.
Yeah.
And they're learning skills without it being a chore necessarily, right? Like you have to do
Mm-hmm.
this. They're copying what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's something that's cool when kids are home, they have the opportunity to do that.
Definitely. And they can learn those self-resiliency and independence skills in a safe environment and not, the funniest thing with college is we expect, a month before they're still having to ask to go to the bathroom. And then we expect them to like pay their bills and do their laundry 2 months later when they're in college. Like we're not adequately preparing people to go be adults, and for me, the biggest thing was letting my kids trust themselves and like you mentioned earlier sleeping until they're not tired anymore. Like we don't have those rigid things in my home where they're forced to go to bed. You go to bed when you're tired, just respect that other people might be sleeping and they naturally fall into a good rhythm. And
Mhm,
my teenager is at that stage where he's hungry all the time, and thank God I
mhm.
taught him to make his own food so that I don't have to be awake at midnight helping him make snacks. He can go do it by himself. He can fry himself some eggs or make a sandwich or use the air fryer, so I think it's just a different it's breaking free of that school mindset, right? Like
Yeah,
what does life look like without school? If that wasn't there, what would you do? What would you focus on? How would you help them become adults? And that's what it is, right? And those are great starting
absolutely.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about our children as human beings, as
Yes.
individual people, I
Mhm.
always admired this about my mom that she said, when one of my brothers, when he was going through puberty, she said, I noticed that he needed extra sleep.
Mhm.
And so he just, slept till 10, whatever it was. And I think that that's just, you don't hear
Yeah.
moms talking about that,
Right. What a
right?
crazy thing. Right?
And
Yeah.
it's like our society in some ways recognizes it because if you think about it, middle school does start later than elementary
Mm.
school. It's like they know that
Well,
the
that
kids are
depends
going
on where
through
you
something
live.
in a sense.
Still,
True,
still,
true.
still where I live, high schoolers are there at 7:30 in the morning. And
That's true.
yeah, we
They're
were
not through
driving.
puberty by then.
No,
So it's,
definitely not. Yeah, it's funny. I was going somewhere early in the morning with my 10-year-old like a week ago. And when we were driving through town was when all the kids were walking to school, the high schoolers. And he was like, Mom, it looks like The Walking Dead. They all just look like zombies. Like he felt he's super empathetic. And he like, I feel so bad for them. Like, no, you can tell not a single one of these kids out here wants to be here. And I was like, and imagine now that like they're supposed to go learn something when they're
Yeah.
all exhausted. They probably haven't eaten anything that wasn't filled with sugar, if at all. They're just trudging to like, oh, it was really depressing. But for him to
Hmm.
see that and make that connection, like they just look
Yeah.
like zombies, Mom. Like,
Well, you
ugh.
just triggered something in my mind about, so when I went to grad school, I was an English major. And so I taught writing
Mm,
I was a, TA or whatever it's called,
mhm,
teaching assistant for 2 years. And I taught 1101, 1102.
mm,
And this is kind of an extension of high school, right? Because kids are going from being in high school under this rigid thing, this rigid system,
mm,
to coming into college. And now for the first time, they're getting to make decisions for themselves.
mm,
And it was interesting to see how the truth came out, right? They didn't care when they were in high school, but they were forced to go every day. Now they're
mhm,
in college and they think they have a choice because they're in college, right?
mhm,
And so there was always those kids who would try to push that attendance thing. Like, I'm just not going to
mm,
go. I'm not going
mm.
to go. I'm going to go. Anything else is more important to me than this.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting to me, when students are forced to learn,
Mhm.
like they didn't want to be there.
Mhm.
They wanted to be somewhere else. They didn't want to be taking that class. And the truth is, they didn't want to do it when they were in high school either.
Right,
So
right.
they just now finally have the autonomy to
Mm,
say, well, I'm just not going to go. And
yeah,
unfortunately, because it's the college system, you're just going to fail. So, I
right.
mean, that's the other part of this. But I'd love
Mhm.
to kind of go back to kind of this philosophy. We've been talking a lot about this already, but this philosophy behind natural learning and supporting children's natural curiosity and growth. What else do you feel is important for parents to know about this topic?
I think the most important thing is to remember that academics is like the littlest piece of who your child is.
Mm,
And that I think can help you really make keener observations, not just about like how the world is working, but about your child specifically, because no other time in our lives is our body changing so much. Like, so I mentioned a couple times, my son's a teenager and most of his friends are older than him. So they're all like 14, 15, 16.
mhm.
And I won't see them for a couple of weeks, and then they'll come over to the house and they're like 6 inches taller than the last time I saw them, right?
Yeah.
And all I can think is like how much their bodies must hurt. Like
Mm,
if my body was stretching and growing, 6 inches in 6 months, I would not want to do anything but sleep and like sit in a hot bathtub. And yet we have so much pressure and expectations on children when so much is changing in their bodies. And so, like, just that's when we talk about natural learning, it's not just the learning part to pay
mm,
attention to, because
mhm,
again, all of those academic skills, they're like, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see my fingers, but like put them as close together as you can imagine them, right? Like tiny, 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 because there's physical changes that are happening. There's so much emotional change that is happening. One day, this person's your best friend, and then they're your worst enemy. Like
mm,
navigating the
mhm,
feelings of that is so challenging. And when we have, again, so many pressures and expectations, those things that are so big become so they feel trivial to the child, but they're
mhm,
not at all. And just social growth, like pay attention to who your child is without the academic pressures, because you'll really be able to see so much. And the most important piece of all of this is connection. You have to
mhm,
find that connection with your child, because that's when they will show you these things, the things that they're interested in, the things that they care about, the things that are hard right now. Um, we just that's the most important thing, is recognizing that growth and development does not just look like learning something new every day, because well, you are learning something new every day, but it might just not be an
mhm,
academic skill, right? It might be how to navigate a hard conversation. It might be standing up to a bully. It might
mhm,
be trying something new, trying again for the 10th time to get something right. There's a lot of ways as humans that we grow and develop and change, not just
mhm,
in childhood, but forever.
mhm,
And if we only boil it down to those standardized checklists, we miss 99% of who the human is underneath.
mhm.
So that's really what natural learning is paying attention to the whole person.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier about how you feel like even today you're learning something new every day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's, the science on this is what, around age 27, 25 to
Mhm.
27, they say that the brain finishes developing, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I personally feel like that is true in the sense that it wasn't until my late 20s and 30s that I feel like my brain unlocked. Like
Yeah.
something opened inside of my brain and I was suddenly able to see things, certain things for what they are, or comprehend things in a new way, or learn in a new way. And it's helped me to have a lot of empathy towards children, and
Mhm.
especially during things like education and learning and all of that. How could we expect a child whose brain hasn't finished developing
Right.
to understand concepts that
Yeah.
I didn't understand until I was in my 30s?
Mhm.
I'll give a small example that doesn't have to do with unschooling or homeschooling, but fertility and
Yes. Oh
our
my God.
cycles and how all of that stuff works. I did not understand that when I was a teenager. It took me until I was about 32 years old
Mhm. Mhm.
before I truly understood how my body as a female even works.
And I will tell
Now,
you, I do. So I home birthed my children and I have done some work as a doula. Most women go through having babies and still don't know that.
yeah,
That's not even just teenager to womanhood. There are women every day having babies and still don't understand everything that's happening. Yeah.
absolutely. And that's such an awakening for me personally
Yeah.
to say, like, I don't want my daughters to have to
Mm.
go through this experience of not truly understanding. Now, maybe there is a piece in their development where they're not going to be able to see things the same way, because if
Yeah.
you're a kid, you're not going to know all of the ins and outs of things depending on
Sure.
what age you are, right? But I
Mhm.
could still teach my daughters about their bodies and how it
Yes.
works and how the cycle works and, all of the different phases of our cycle. That's not something that there is such a huge focus on in
Mm.
school,
Mm-mm.
when that is one of the most important things and facets about our whole entire lives.
Right. Yeah.
We're
And I
teaching
have, yeah.
calculus, but not about how our bodies work?
Yeah, and I only have boys, but that was never something we hid from that, like, they're
Mhm,
going to have partners one day that go through all of that. That will matter to them
mhm,
too. They were there when I had home births, you know,
mhm,
like that they were part of that. It wasn't this, yeah, that's a big thing. It's just like this shame around so many things about who we are as people or ignoring really important things. And as a homeschooler and unschooler, you have the opportunity. This is really where you get to say what's important,
mhm,
what matters in this
mhm,
life.
mhm.
Those kinds of things, how your body
Yep.
works matters. And even I learned a lot of those things when I had my children and about fertility. But even I so last was it last year, I guess I had a hysterectomy and I was having like issues, which led to the hysterectomy. But I didn't even realize like how much was going on with my body until after that procedure,
Mm,
and had to deal with like how many months and years did I live with like pain and discomfort and hormonal because I didn't know. Like we
mhm,
don't talk about these kinds of things and nobody ever made time to have those discussions with me to talk about those kinds of things.
mhm.
Um, but we don't prioritize that kind of stuff, and
Absolutely.
that, now having that experience will be a priority for me to teach my children and those around me. So, yeah.
And even from, you mentioned you have boys, even from it doesn't matter which gender, all children go through puberty.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
children go through those hormonal changes.
very true.
And I feel that if we had more conversations around that and normalizing, let's use that
Mhm,
word,
mhm,
that your body is changing and that's okay. And you're
mhm.
going to feel a little crazy sometimes, but that's
Yeah,
normal.
yeah,
Because I remember going through that as a teenager and feeling like I was crazy, like something was wrong with me, but nothing was wrong with me. My body was just going through its natural changes. Now,
yeah,
maybe for some people, there is a sign that maybe they have type 1 diabetes and don't know it,
sure,
but because they
sure.
don't know their body, you know what I mean?
Mm,
So,
mhm.
not every situation's the same, but I think that when we just brush it all under the rug and then
Yeah,
kids become teenagers and feel this depression, we don't sit and talk to them about why they might feel that way.
yeah. Well,
That's
and
a
that's,
side of things that
totally
is
the
important.
emotional growth that we go through, and what an expectation we have of children to just be happy all the time, that they should
Mm,
just be happy. And, we have
mhm,
this thing in our home where we'll just, everyone, someone, it's okay to point that out. Like, I think you're having a bad day today. My kids will say it to me. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes I have bad days. That's going to happen. We're humans. We're people in this crazy world. We're going to have bad days, but that doesn't mean that we have to fight or that I don't love you. Like, I get to have bad days and you also get to have bad days where, we'll just leave you alone. And if we're not caught up in that system that doesn't stop churning, where, well, too bad you're having a bad day, you have to go to school, or too
mhm,
bad you have to go to work. If that's the system also, right? Like it's this culture of doesn't matter, productivity over everything. And when you can step away from that, you can tune into those things like your emotions and your physical feelings, and just having an off day is a normal thing and it's okay. And
mhm,
how can we help people having those off days instead of judging them or pressuring them to move forward anyway? Like
mhm.
it's very freeing the more you step out of that world and then just embrace it, right? And like it's like I say, homeschooling might be you opening one door and then all of a sudden you see like all of the other ways in which the world is like kind of crazy around you. You start to just open your eyes to so
Absolutely.
many other things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember when I first got my cycle, it was very heavy and like hard for me to adjust to. But thank God I was homeschooled
Oh my
because I could
gosh.
stay in bed
Yeah.
and I could, do whatever I needed to do. I couldn't imagine having to get up and go to school and feel that way and go through those feelings in a formal, under the fluorescence, get this done,
Mhm.
type of way. So,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I want to kind of ask you a little bit about, parents that are unsure about where
Mm.
to start and what to do. What are some of the first steps that they can begin to start unschooling or practicing natural learning at home? And maybe this is someone who's already homeschooling. That might be
Mhm.
one example. Or maybe
Mhm.
this is someone whose kids are going to formal school right now and they want to make the switch.
Yeah, so I mean, those are going to be a little bit different unless, so
Mhm.
if you're well, maybe not. If your child is in any kind of rigid system, that can be public school, that can be home. If you look at your, dining room table and it's covered with textbooks right now and that doesn't feel good to you, that's okay, right? But there's going to be that period where you need to deschool with the kids. They need to heal from that experience and recognize that there's no timeline for that. And this is one of the big myths I've seen out there with deschooling is that there's someone somewhere at some time put a formula to it, saying like for every year they were in school, you need a month of deschooling, and which is very like disingenuous timeline of like, okay, you're done now, you have to go back to normal. And that's not the goal. The goal is not to reject it for a little while to heal from it, just to go back to the normalcy of learning looking a certain way. The goal of this is to find a new normal. And so, really, it is just this daily work of undoing what you formerly believed and letting your children rediscover who they are. Now, if you have little kids and they've never had to be in that system, then nothing has to change. And that's the best part of it. Just keep living. Again, ask yourself every day, every time you have that fear, if school didn't exist, what would we do? And then you do those things and you just live with them. And that's the hardest, but yet easiest thing to do. But if you are in that journey where you're kind of unlearning with your children, connection again is going to be the most important thing. Having conversations with your kids, helping them rediscover what it's like. Because, imagine being a child who, until you were 10, 12 years old, every day your alarm went off, you did the same rigid thing. And then all of a sudden, you don't have to do that anymore. A big part of them is going to feel like at any moment you're going to change your mind and rip that
Mhm.
out from under them. And so there's like, and that's what educational trauma is. And that's like a whole other podcast episode we could talk about. But like feeling safe in that is a big thing. Like the security of that feeling okay. Like, is she going to change her mind? There's no way mom's not going to make me do the textbooks anymore, right? Like, there's no way she's
Mhm.
not going to make me go back to school. That is something that needs to heal, and that can take a while. And they have to kind of the first layer of healing is like trusting that this is real, that this is okay, that this is normal now. And then the layer of rediscovering, whoa, my time is my own. What do I do now? Like, I get to just do art. Do I like art? Am I good at art? I get to play video games. I get to go outside. Like, having to rediscover, that's a whole new layer, right? Because for however long they were in that system, even if it was at home, that was conditioning still. And so they
Yeah.
get to they have to relearn what that's like, even just being able to sleep until they're not tired, eat when they're hungry, go to the bathroom when they need to. All of that takes new layers of rediscovering. So the most important thing is just be okay with living together, existing together, seeing the learning in the everyday things, and just doing that healing work. Because, so for example, with Bridge Academy, what I run, I have consult calls with parents who will ask me exactly that. Well, okay, we're going to pull them out of public school. We're committed to this. What do I do now? And I tell them, you know what? If the only thing you do for the whole next school year is just heal, that matters.
Mm.
That is the most important thing that you can do, because they won't have to do that when they're 20 or when they're 40. They'll get to do that now. And then they have that time to rediscover themselves. And it is never wasted time. So
Absolutely.
whatever amount of time it takes for them or for you to work through that processing, that is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And it sounds like for the parents, it's also learning to enjoy your children. Maybe
Yeah.
again, maybe,
Mhm.
maybe you haven't been. And so
Mhm.
maybe it's learning to enjoy being with them or seeing those curiosity sparks and things come up.
Mhm.
I know that my little guy who's 2.5, he's starting to talk more and say things. And my husband went out of town for work, and we were going to bed, and we called him before bed, and my husband said, hi, Benny, how are you? And he said, good. And it was the first time he ever did that. It was the
Oh.
first time he ever responded to that
Mhm.
question, how are you? And I just remember in that moment going, "Oh, that's so sweet. Like, that's the first
Mhm.
time." And I
Mhm.
think it's just, relishing in those moments of excitement for them when they're learning something new and that they're
Mhm.
really, just showing who they are as little people. I
Mhm.
think we can lose our own excitement for that sometimes because we're so used to just being in the hustle and bustle of life. And
Yeah.
that's something that's so cool about unschooling and natural learning is this idea that we get to be excited for our kids and about
Mhm.
our kids and the things that they're doing and learning. We all know our kids love to show off and, hey,
Mhm.
watch me, look what I can do.
Yeah.
Being happy for them in those moments.
Mhm.
It's not
And the
always
older
easy.
they get, speaking from as a mom of teens, and
Hmm.
I'm also the neighborhood mom, so there's so many much older kids that are hanging out at our house all the time, just because there's a reason, right? It feels safe here. We love
Hmm.
everything. We don't only ask you about school. Like, this is a
Yeah.
fun, safe place to
Yeah.
be. They all flock to our house. Just being able to like connect with them when they're teens too, because you built those relationships so strongly when they were little. It
Mm-hmm.
matters so much what they're willing to share with you. It's
That's a great point.
as not just for my children being that way, but the privilege that I feel of knowing that other kids come to say things to us and open up to me,
And
because they
feel
don't feel
safe.
that connection at home,
Mm.
is really quite a privilege. So connection really, really, really matters. And the more you can do that when they're little, the more time you can spend with them, the easier that is when they're older. And then how much easier it is for them as teens to know they have that
Hmm.
safety net of somebody that's listening to them, that cares about them, that understands who they are. It continues to matter. So it's really important to build that connection.
That's a really great point. My sister is my co-host on this podcast. She's usually on these episodes, but
Mm.
she's working on moving again for the
Oh boy.
500th time. So, and we did an intro episode for this series. And one of the things that we mentioned was about how the more time we spend with our kids, the more opportunity we have to build that connection. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, we send kids away for 6, 8 hours a day. We're gone. Maybe they go to somewhere after school too. So we're only really with them for an hour,
The most stressful
maybe
times
two
of the day.
hours.
Yeah.
The most stressful time, and everyone is on edge and tired and
Mhm.
all of that. There's no opportunity to build that connection. And so when something bad happens to a child or something that potentially even dangerous,
Yeah.
who do they tell?
Mhm.
Are they gonna tell this parent that is their authoritative figure that they've only been with for 45 minutes every night?
Yeah.
Or are they gonna talk to someone else?
Yes. And
So
I
I
will
think that
tell you, they will talk to somebody else.
oh,
And
yeah.
I have had numerous children say to me, if something bad happens or I get in trouble, can I call you
Mm,
instead of my parent? They have said that to me because they
mhm.
know the difference in what will happen, the difference in how I will react versus now, of course we have to have conversations about I'm not your parent, but
Sure,
to know
sure.
there's that. I think it's really important for parents to hear that, because
Yes.
they will find a safe place. And if it isn't with you, it is going to be with someone else. And
Mhm.
you don't always know that you can trust that other person. So
Exactly.
it's they will find somebody, and it might even be a
Yeah.
peer that can't be trusted, or you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
they will find somebody that they can trust, and it might not be you. So do the work to make it you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to be my next question for you because a lot of times parents don't find out these things until their kids are grown, that
Yes.
certain things happen to them,
Yep.
right? Because they didn't feel comfortable talking to mom and dad when they were kids. So, can you share a little bit about how to foster that type of
Mm,
relationship where your kids do open up to you and they do
mhm.
want to share everything with you, that they talk to you? How do you
Yeah.
foster that? How do you create that?
I mean, obviously, the more time you spend together is going to help that, right? The more time you spend with someone, the more you're going to be able to connect with them. But I think a lot of it is modeling. So my husband and I share openly about our feelings with each other. We have discussions openly with our children. We apologize when we've been too harsh or when we've been in a bad mood. It's a lot of it is just emotional security, right? Being
Mm,
able to have conversations and model those conversations that are hard, talk about hard things, but also remembering to listen without judgment,
mhm,
accept that your children are people. They're going to make mistakes. And when you make them feel bad about those mistakes, they internalize that and then they won't want to share with you the next time.
mm,
Being careful with how often you say no, what
mhm,
you set boundaries for. In our home, for example, boundaries, hard boundaries are things around safety. You still don't have to like them, but we have boundaries around curfew, right? Because that's a hard boundary in our home, because at certain times of the night, it's not safe for you to not be home anymore. There's a
mhm,
safety concern.
mhm,
Or, wearing a helmet, that's a safety concern, whatever. Wearing a seatbelt, you got to wear a seatbelt. We have safety concerns are hard boundaries, and everything else we talk about, we negotiate, and we do that
mhm,
together. And it's never because I said so. It's because this is, I still get to make the decisions at the end, but we're going to talk about them. And treating your child as a full human and that their emotions matter,
mhm,
that's how you build connection. And it doesn't mean that everything's always fantastic. We certainly have moments in our home that are frustrating and we argue, but we have a mutual respect, and I build routines in with my children where they know that there's those points during the day where they can always connect with me, and we don't have to talk, but maybe we just high five, or I
mhm,
peek in, or there's little things
mhm.
built through the routines during the day that allow us to have those connection points. But it's really, it's more than anything, modeling that emotional security and being able to have hard conversations.
Allowing kids to have their own feelings
Yes.
and talk to them about it versus shutting them
Mhm.
down, right? Or
Yeah.
saying, stop acting like that, stop doing that. I'll give you a small example from last night. Okay, so we were at Dollywood, which is a theme park, and it was closing. My
Mm,
husband really wanted a milkshake. He was the one who wanted it. So he goes to this ice cream place, like this is the end, right? And me and all the kids were in it doing something else. And he didn't hear my daughter that she had asked for actual ice cream. So he
mm,
got milkshakes for everyone, right? And so when we come out from where we are, he has milkshakes and she gets upset.
mm,
She starts crying and said, I really wanted ice cream. And, I thought I told you I wanted ice cream or something like that. And, he could have reacted in a million ways,
mm,
right? And I think
mhm.
that a way that a lot of parents would react in that situation is, we'll just be grateful you got anything,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But my husband got down on his knees, like, so he could be eye to eye.
Mhm.
And he said, I am so sorry. I didn't hear you when you said you wanted ice cream. I know it sounds like that's what you really wanted. And I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to get that for you.
Mhm.
And, she was still upset and she was able to go through her feelings. And
Mhm.
I later talked to her about grace and forgiveness. And
Mhm.
she said, I don't think I could do that, mommy.
I'm not ready yet.
I'm not ready yet. But, we were able to have this conversation about how sometimes people make mistakes or sometimes people don't hear or don't listen. And it opened up a larger conversation instead of it being about, let me try to control her emotion right now and not
Yeah.
allow her to cry in this public place and not allow
Yeah.
her to have feelings. She's allowed to have her feelings.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that, for me personally, I know I want to allow her to have so that she can be her own person, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't want her to just be this robot, like, oh, I can't cry about this because I got something, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
just a small little
But
example.
that continues to matter, and, recently, my oldest was having an issue with one of his friends, and he came and talked to me about it,
Mm,
and I gave him some advice, and later, when that friend found out that he had talked to me, he made fun of him. He's like, "Oh, you're such a little baby. You still tell your mom your problems." And then my son, again, so he was like, "Yes, I have a relationship with my mom.
mhm,
That's a good thing." And
mhm,
he was able to see the benefits of that. And we talked later, and he was like, "I don't think my friend has that with his
mm,
mom." And
mm,
I think it was jealousy. Like, he was able to say, I think it actually made him sad that he couldn't go to his mom and
mhm.
had to deal with those feelings as a child by himself, and how
Absolutely.
sad and alone that feels. Um, and for
Yeah.
him to recognize that difference was a really powerful moment. I think sad and scary, but a powerful moment for him to see, whoa, that's not normal that I have that connection with my parents. So
That's
yeah.
great that he was able
Yeah.
to see that and that
Yeah.
he was able to not care what the friend
Yes.
thought, right? Because so
Yeah.
many kids just wanna people please their peers and like, "Oh, yeah,
Mm.
talk down
Yeah,
about my mom."
definitely. I think for me, as somebody that has noticed, or, I notice all of those things about my kids because I don't just focus on academics.
Mm,
That was the biggest moment of growth for my son in the last year, that
mm,
he didn't care what his peers were saying, that he made his
interesting.
own, that
Mhm,
seeing that emotional development,
mhm.
that made me more happy than any test score he could have brought home, because what an amazing
Oh,
growth as a human. How
totally.
many adults still care so much what other people think? But for
Most of
him,
them.
for him to recognize what it was at its core, to have the emotional intelligence to be, oh, okay, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
Mhm.
That was huge for me.
That's amazing. Wow,
Yeah.
what a great milestone too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Definitely.
our society is so afraid of not being liked or,
Hmm.
not being likable or getting deleted on social media because you
Right.
post something that you really feel or that
Yeah.
you really think and, "Oh, people are gonna not like me for this."
Hmm.
I mean, that's the world in which we live in, and it's a sad place that we
Yeah.
can't be ourselves and think for ourselves because we're worried about what other people think.
Definitely.
Now, I want to give you opportunity to share a little bit more
Mhm.
about you have amazing resources
Mhm.
and community support through Your Natural Learner and through Bridge Academy. So share a
Mhm.
little bit more about that and what you're doing there and what the tools that you can provide to families because I'm sure people are going to have lots of questions about
Yeah.
how they can find you, what they can learn, they can get involved.
Mhm.
Share a little bit
Yeah.
more with us.
Totally. So the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time. I think
I
that's
love
where
your
we
Instagram.
connected. Yeah, that's where
Yes, I love your
it's just
Instagram.
easiest for me. So that's at Your Natural Learner. So that's the easiest place to find me. And anything I do is going to be there anyway. I've always got new ideas. But so through Natural Learner, Your Natural Learner is where my curriculum is for K through eighth grade, and then just lots of workshops and things that I'm running all of the time. So all kinds of cool
Mhm,
stuff over there. Again, you can see it all through Instagram. And then Bridge Academy is, again, the private school for homeschoolers and unschoolers that we founded. Again, I post about that on my Instagram too. So you can find that there, but the
yeah.
site for that is bridgeacademy.us. But that incorporates, or when you enroll in Bridge Academy, you actually get all of the Your Natural Learner curriculum anyway to use as a resource. You get all of the support as either a private schooler or a homeschooler, community, other resources. So pretty great
Mhm.
place to be. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Bridge Academy, as you mentioned earlier, allows you to actually unenroll,
Yeah.
unschool, but enroll
Yes.
in a community where you don't have to necessarily, except you mentioned 2 states,
Hmm.
you don't have
Very
to
few. Yeah.
go through all the hoops and bells and
Mm.
whistles that you may have to go through when it comes to testing and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically a private school is how we're registered in almost every state. So um, we have like check-in forms. They call them the learning logs. So you and or the kids together You hop into that once a month or so and you share what you've been doing together. If that looks like curriculum, that's really cool. Awesome. Share that with us. If that looks like you're world schooling and traveling and that's how you learn, cool. Share that. You share all the things you're working on. And we take all of that information and turn that into official academic credit so that your children still get transcripts just as if they were in a private school, so that they can become, they can go to college with those transcripts, transfer back to a school if they want to. It turns real life learning into real academic credit, basically. So pretty cool.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. So definitely visit bridgeacademy.us for more information on that. She also
Yep.
mentioned the website yournaturallearner.com. And of course, you have to go follow her Instagram, instagram.com
Mhm.
/ your natural learner. I love all your posts, and I think Instagram knows it because lately I've been logging in. It's like first, I'm like, yes, 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 yes,
Yep. They're
share.
right. Awesome.
The
Yay,
more,
beating
of
the
course,
algorithm.
the more I'm engaging with it, that's going to give it to me. So I love
Yes.
it, but I love everything
Great.
that you're sharing. It just resonates so much with my own journey with my kids right now and where we're headed. So yeah, I
Yay.
appreciate you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience today?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll maybe end with how I end most interviews. So if you've listened to me anywhere else, I'm sorry for repeating it. But anytime that fear is popping up, so wherever you are on your journey, I promise you, there's going to be a moment of like, oh, am I doing all of this so wrong? Right? Something
Mm,
is going to happen that makes you feel that way. So
mhm,
when you feel that fear, I want you to notice that it's coming. Don't react to it. And I want you to give yourself 24 hours. And for 24 hours, just turn it all off and spend that 24 hours observing your child with zero expectations, because I promise you in those 24 hours, they're going to show you something new, something unique, something amazing, something small that will help you see everything's okay. They are growing, they are developing. That fear is yours, it isn't theirs. And it helps you to make more informed choices than just reacting to that fear if you did in the beginning.
mhm. Amazing. That's
Yeah,
fantastic advice. And it's great advice for more than just this, too. A
totally.
lot of things in life, we have fear around it, right? I mean, we were talking
Mhm.
about birth before earlier. It's another
Yeah.
big area, but definitely in the area of this. That's awesome. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for being here and for sharing all of this fantastic information.
of course. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. And thank you for tuning in and being on this journey with us. If you would like to follow along outside the podcast, be sure to join the mission on Instagram, Facebook, and this will also be on YouTube at The Radiant Mission. And today we're going to close with Proverbs 1, verse 5. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. We're wishing you a radiant week, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.